Okay, so we've talked about cold emailing and cold calling, but how do you mix them together and at what frequency? In this section, we're going to talk about the ideal outreach cadence. The first thing that's important to understand is that your cadence is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You need to calibrate your methodology, whether that's phone, email, social, with your industry's typical preferred communication medium. For startup biz dev, people prefer email first. If email doesn't work, then I go phone. Sometimes you can even sprinkle in social in there. Now, compare this with somebody like restaurants. Email is tough on restaurants. A lot of these old owners are old school people that don't even have an email address, so you have to hit them by phone. The reason that I bring this up is just to demonstrate that you're going to have the most success if you tailor this to what the person or people that you're trying to reach out to, how they typically communicate for business matters. Here's what I perceive as the ideal cadence for startup business development. Assuming that there's no introduction, starting out with a cold email. 3 to 7 days after that, if I don't hear back from that person, sending another cold email and using the tactic of following up by replying directly to the original cold email you sent. If I don't hear back from them then trying a cold call 1 day after I sent the second cold email. I don't want to leave a voicemail here because I want to try to get them live if I can. 1 day after that cold call, the next day I will try to cold call them again. If I can't get through to them directly, I will leave a voicemail. And then if nobody gets back to me 2 days after leaving that voicemail, I'll then shoot them a brand new email referencing the fact that I called them. Now, if this is a little unclear, you can go back into the cold email and cold call sections that specify this. But this is basically the process to try to convince somebody that you're not familiar with, that you don't know, to get a meeting with you by going in cold. What do you do if this doesn't work? What happens if they never respond? Well, in this situation, I typically think it's best to wait 1 week and then try to find an alternative route. And what I mean by route is trying to find somebody else at that company that you might be able to convince to have a meeting with you. Ideally, the alternative route is through a different but equally relevant department. For biz dev, especially product integrations, it's often a tandem of biz dev and product. So if you went in through the biz dev route and that didn't work, try reaching out to somebody in the product department. And this is product managers, director of products, VP of products, whoever it might be. But a lot of times these people have just as much weight in getting deals done and haven't even realized the fact that you tried to reach out to the biz dev department. So this is a brand new, fresh slate to potentially tighten up the message and try to get in a different route. Now, one thing you could also do if that's not an option is going above or below the contact that you try to reach out to within the same department. I always recommend trying to go above first just because you want to get immediately to somebody with more decision-making power versus having to work your way up. It's just faster and more efficient. But if that doesn't work, you can go below and achieve success there. I wanted to highlight why I brought up the fact that you should ideally try to get in a different but equally relevant department first. Generally, people just within the same department talk. And if somebody gets a cold email and says, hey, have you heard of these guys? Yeah, they emailed me. I didn't think it was that interesting. It's just not as likely to stick as a situation where somebody in that department doesn't know that you've already tried reaching out to them. There's kind of a weird psychology, social proof thing going on there, but generally it's better to just try to get to somebody that doesn't know you've already tried to contact the company unsuccessfully. Let's dig into this concept of trying to go above somebody in the same department a little bit more. So ideally, the best way to do this is just to take the same approach on this new person using email just like you did on the first person. In this juncture, because people might have talked, it's not a bad idea to maybe try to attack a different pain point. Because again, the first person stakeholder that you reach out to, maybe the reason they didn't get back to you is because they were having a bad day, but there's a good chance that the reason that they didn't get back to you is the fact that you brought up something that wasn't a priority. So here's where you might want to attack a different pain point. So if you originally alluded to how a relationship could drive traffic to their site, maybe this time bring up how it might be able to grow their email list. And I put just a little star here, assuming that your product actually does these things or that a relationship would do these things. You never, ever, ever want to lie in life, and especially business, because your reputation goes with you everywhere. When you do this, should you reference your first attempt? So should you say, hey, I've reached out previously to this person and they didn't get back to me? This can work, but I actually usually find that it does more harm than good, because in the instance that the relationship is actually one that has some legs, it makes the first person look bad because they didn't respond to you, and you don't want to get off on the wrong foot with the company or have somebody internally not happy with you. And if the relationship is being evaluated, the fact that somebody that person knows and trusts said no to you doesn't necessarily help your cause for getting that initial meeting. So I personally don't think it's a good practice to reference that first attempt, at least in a initial cold email. So let's talk about social media, because we've talked a lot about cold calling, about cold emails, but where does social come in? Trying to connect with prospects on social media can work, but it's just important that you calibrate this both with the company and the individual. If you're dealing with a startup and they're all over social media and it seems like everybody at the company is incredibly savvy and they're into it and they're reaching out to strangers, that's great. Try to hit them up on social if you need to, if email doesn't work. But if somebody is old school, like a Yellow Pages company or a restaurant or somebody that just isn't necessarily that tech savvy, they're not going to be all that receptive on social media. I think that if you do decide to go social media, Twitter is the ideal place to connect, just because people have built a habit there of connecting with strangers. Facebook, it's just a little personal. A lot of people only use Facebook with their friends and family. So that can be a little weird if a business contact is reaching out to you on Facebook. And then lastly, I'll bring up LinkedIn. If you've already emailed and called, a LinkedIn message is just redundant. But that's not to say that it can't work. I think that connecting on LinkedIn with somebody that you don't know, you have no rapport with, is a little odd. But it's not to say that I know people that do this and have it work for them. Let's talk about how to use Twitter, because again, I think that's the ideal channel. And personally, I think it's best peppered in after email if you identify that somebody's incredibly social savvy. There's some good tweets that you might send after you've sent some emails and they haven't gotten back to you. Hey, I shot you an email the other day. Just wanted to make sure you received it. Hey, did you get my email about whatever the initiatives is that you brought up? These are good because they're just little subtle nudges on a different channel. And again, one of the reasons that people don't respond is simply just because they forgot. It's not always because they weren't interested. So these things accomplish a little nudge that if somebody didn't get back to you because they forgot or they lost it or something came up, this is a good way to bring that back to the forefront of their periphery. Another thing you can do is just retweet or comment on something that they tweeted about without even mentioning your outreach. When somebody sees if you do this, and a lot of people are seeing who's retweeting them, who's mentioning them, whatever it is, somebody sees your name, it might click with them that, oh my gosh, I forgot this person emailed me, because they're going to look at your profile, they're going to see what company you're from, and that might again bring the fact that you emailed them already back to the forefront of their periphery. So both these are good strategies. Let's talk about some bad tweets. Hey, I sent you an email and haven't heard back from you. I emailed you the other day about this. Is that something you're interested in? You have to remember that Twitter is a public forum. So calling somebody out, and even though the only people that see this when you tweet directly at somebody are the people that follow the both of you, when you're calling somebody out like this, that you haven't heard back from them, it's just not a good way to start off a relationship. It doesn't necessarily make somebody excited to talk to you. It can bring the fact that you emailed them back to the forefront of their mind, but it just does it in a way that I don't think is effective as some ways that are a bit more elegant. And then flat out asking them whether they're interested in doing a deal with you in a public forum, again, not very good. I generally just think that it's better to be cryptic in these instances when you're talking about two companies working together. Another cool strategy that you can use to leverage social media to get people to respond to you if they haven't is taking advantage of push notifications and the prompts that they can ingrain. Every time you connect with somebody on a service, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, so you follow them, you ask to connect with them, you friend them, you like them, whatever it is, that for a lot of people they're going to receive emails, and in that email they're going to see your name. What this does is it can prompt a response out of them. So it can prompt them to remember that, oh, I have to get back to this person. It can even just familiarize their name in a positive way, because when you take action on somebody by connecting with somebody or by doing something they pushed out, that kind of massages their ego a little bit and puts you in a nice light. So this is just a little strategy that you can use to prompt responses from previous actions like emails or calls on social media. Just a few places you can nudge to get more specific: Twitter, LinkedIn, Quora. Again, Facebook is a bit personal. And if you're not familiar with Quora, basically you can follow people on that site. It's a question and answer site. And for people that are in tech startups, a lot of people are on Quora. So there's a good chance your prospect might just be on there. If all of this doesn't work, if the cold emails, the cold calls, and the social media doesn't work, sometimes you just have to try to get in front of these people at events. Now, the go-to places that you can do this are industry conferences and trade shows, or even local meetups if we're talking about a company that is in your city. And sometimes, if all this digital and phone communication doesn't work, you just have to try to figure out where these people are going to be and how you can get in front of them. And conferences, trade shows, and local events are great places to do this. Now, it's important if you do this that you need to take the right mindset. Your goal should not be to close somebody at an event. It's to develop rapport, become a friendly face, and maybe even set up a meeting at a later date. You don't want to pitch because, again, this person's just going to an event. They're probably hanging out with friends or have their own agenda. They're not primed to be receptive to a full-on pitch at that moment. So hold off on the pitch. Take the same type of mindset to a cold call where you'd like to delay that to an instance where they're going to be more receptive. Now, if they invite a pitch and say, yeah, tell me about your company, how could we work together? Then it makes sense to kind of go down the route of pitching. But otherwise, you want to develop rapport and ideally use that rapport to set up a meeting at a later date with a follow-up email or letting them know that you're going to email them about setting up a meeting. Again, delay it until they are primed to hear from you. If you go to industry trade shows or conferences that are multiple day occasions, there are certain places where it's better to build rapport than others, and you can really forge deep bonds where almost you can guarantee that somebody's going to get back to you if you email them after the event. And where this occurs is not the exhibit floor. It's typically at the evening festivities, so think parties. When you get to an event, it's a best practice to get a feel for what might be going on that night, who might be going to which events, and then put on your fun face. Over drinks, over conversation at these events is where you can really forge some excellent bonds with people that you want to reach out to and that you want to do business relationships with. What you can do is recall these memories, and I call this callback humor, when you go and email these people, you go and call them. So, have an amazing night, and then when you send an email to this person, reference the fun memories from that night or the things you laughed about, the jokes, whatever it may be. And this just engenders the good positive feelings that those people had when they met you, which makes them more likely to respond.